Faded Jeans to Army Greens, A Story of Army Life from Basic to Desert Storm by Mike Travis, PhD. Copyright 2016. This is the updated 35th anniversary edition from Desert Storm 2026. Dedication. I am dedicating this book to all of the soldiers who have given their lives to keep our country safe. I am also dedicating this to all of the families who have stood by while soldiers have been away at war. But most of all, I want to dedicate this book to James David Tatum, my friend, who was killed in Operation Desert Storm. James has inspired me to continue striving for my best, even when I didn't think I could. Acknowledgements. I want to thank my family for all their support throughout this process, especially Barb, my mom, and Susie, my wife, who both spent countless hours editing and giving me constructive feedback to help me make this book better. I would also like to thank Mitchell Dwyer for inspiring me to participate in the National Novel Writing Month NaNoWriMo event in November of 2015, which was the motivation I needed to finally write this book. I wrote this book based on what I experienced in my life. It was challenging to remember every detail correctly after 25 years. However, I have tried my best to tell the true story of what happened to me through my Army experience. For legal reasons, I have changed most of the names in this book. If you have any questions or think I made any mistakes, please contact me anytime and I will correct it for future editions. The title for the book was inspired by one of the most common military cadences that I marched to many times. It has many names and is modified based on the branch of service you are in. One cadence has the title, What the Army Has Done to Me. Here are a few lines from it. Mama, mama, can't you see what the Army's done to me? They took away my faded jeans. Now I'm wearing Army greens. Introduction. A twist of fate in a few hours is all that separated two soldiers. One soldier's story ended in tragedy, and the other soldier's story continues on today, trying his best to honor the other. This sounds like a movie, but it is the true story of my life and how it changed one fateful day in 1991. However, let's go back in time a little bit, way back to my youth. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, while my dad was working at IBM. My mom stayed home and took care of the 4 children, my 2 younger sisters, my younger brother, and me. I was raised Catholic and spent many hours in church, at religious study groups, and in Catholic school. I was never sold on the idea of faith, a blind belief in something you wouldn't know is true until you die. And I struggled at times with the idea that if you didn't believe in God and Jesus Christ, you were going to hell. So with these challenges, I pretty much stopped going to church once I turned 18. However, there were times along my journey of life that I felt something spiritual, whether it be a bit of luck, keeping me from going off a dirt road when I was driving too fast, or a person who talked me back on track when I was ready to go off the rails. And then, of course, the fact that I'm here, writing this story now rather than buried in the ground. High school was relatively easy for me as I could memorize things I learned fairly well. While I never got straight A's, I did do enough to graduate with a 3.4 GPA. I rushed through homework at the last minute and spent most of my time working as a shift supervisor at the local Hardee's restaurant, a restaurant that I started working at before they opened business. My grades were good enough to get me into the University of Colorado, Boulder, CU, where I started my first year of college. Right off the bat, I felt out of place there. I was commuting by bus from my parents' basement to college, but the classes were much harder than high school, and I just had too much time on my hands to focus on school. Instead, I continued to work full-time and fell into a rut. I needed a change, but I didn't know what. For my second year of college, my closest friend and I decided to go to the University of Las Vegas, UNLV. This was a big change, but I felt I was ready. The first week went well, but after that it was all downhill. Classes were fine this time, but the problem was that I had such a sheltered childhood that I was totally unprepared to be away from home. I had no idea how to take care of myself. I didn't really even know how to do laundry or cook a simple meal. One semester at UNLV and I was back at CU in Boulder. I couldn't believe I was back in the same place, the same girlfriend and the same simple life. It just wasn't me. I felt like a lost soul. I'm not sure when I first made the decision to join the military. Maybe it was after a visit from my Uncle Bob, who had retired from the Air Force and suggested I join. Or maybe it was the fact that I drove past the recruiting stations every day coming home from work. I have always been very patriotic, and I wanted to give back to my country in some way. It was 1988, and the world seemed safe at the moment, so I decided to try the Air Force first, following in my uncle's footsteps. But their shortest enlistment was 4 years. While I wanted to join the military, I certainly wasn't ready to give up 4 years of my life. What if I hit it on day one? That would be a long, brutal, painful decision. I went to the Army recruiter next, and luckily they had shorter enlistments. I walked into the station and was greeted with open arms, of course. The recruitment station was just as you would expect. They promise the world but deliver very little, just like a used car salesman. They had promises of letting you choose your permanent duty station from a variety of choices. What was exciting for me was they had a 2-year enlistment program. This sounded perfect. 2 years would go by fast, and if I liked it, I could always re-enlist. The most important thing was that it would force me out of my hometown and help me to grow up. I wanted a new adventure. I wanted to give back to my country because I was grateful for the freedom the United States had given me as a citizen. Plus, there was money for college. Not much for a 2-year enlistment, but it would help when I returned to civilian life. My parents nearly passed out from the announcement of my decision, and my sisters told me not to go. But I went for it anyway. A white, middle-class boy, 20 years old, on my way to the Army. Probably not what anyone thought I would do when I was younger. I was scrawny, so skinny that I used to be called Toothpick by kids in school. I was also very hyper and full of boundless energy. I didn't eat well either since I worked in fast food from the day I turned 16 until the spring of 1988, when I finally quit to prepare for my new life. When you sign up for the military, they don't give you the full details about everything. You learn most of them along the way. Preparing to sign on the dotted line, I noticed it was an 8-year commitment. My 2-year active term and then 6 years inactive duty tacked on. The recruitment sergeant told me not to worry after active duty. You were out. Unless they called you back in times of war. We both had a good chuckle. It was the late 80s, and there wasn't much chance of the U.S. entering a war. Famous last words. Signing the forms at the recruiter's office began a slow process toward the day I actually was in uniform. I signed up during the summer of 1988, but I didn't actually leave for basic training until October. The first step was the testing. Because it was an all-day event, they made you stay overnight in a hotel near the processing station in Denver. But my nerves and the unfamiliar bed didn't let me sleep at all that night. I was up ready to go when they came for me at 6:30 a.m. I was driven to the Military Enlistment Processing Station, MEPS. At MEPS, they tested you for everything to make sure you were physically, mentally, and psychologically fit. By the end of a long day of waiting in multiple lines, I made it to the final stage. They sat me in front of a TV with VCR and asked me what I wanted to do in the military. Based on my scores and most importantly a 2-year enlistment, the options were limited. My choices came down to only a few. Infantry, no thank you. Food service specialist, and petroleum supply specialist. I decided to watch the food service video first. To my shock, it looked like exactly what I'd been doing in fast food for the past 4 years. I thought to myself, I can't do it. I need something new. Then I watched the petroleum supply video. These videos were so funny, the usual military stuff. Being a petroleum supply specialist makes you a critical part of the military. You are the lifeblood to a unit, ensuring they have enough fuel to get the mission completed. And on it went. The thing that intrigued me most was driving a fuel truck. It is weird, but one of my childhood dreams was to drive a big truck. Not sure why. Maybe it was because I was so scrawny. So I signed up as a petroleum supply specialist. I was scheduled to leave for basic on October 11th, 1988. This gave me about 3 months to get my life in order and ready to go. Mind games. The one thing I knew about basic training from the movies was the mind games. Their goal was to break down every soldier to make them almost robots. A war can't be run if soldiers are constantly questioning everything in every order. They need soldiers who will shoot when they are told to shoot. I didn't want to become one of those mindless freaks. I wanted to prove that I could come out of this not only intact but better. So I started training. Boulder, Colorado in the summer and fall is a great place to live. The weather is hot but dry, and the town backs up to the mountains. So I ran up the mountains, rock climbed without ropes, and sat in the woods just listening to the birds and the deer. I took some time off, and then I realized, crap, what the hell had I done? Another quick decision that had gotten me into trouble, but it was too late to turn back, and I wasn't going to let them break me. Celebration or the beginning of a nightmare? I have great friends, wonderful friends actually. They gave me the best party ever before I left for the army. They made me some great, crazy jungle juice, which I proceeded to drink way too much of. Then there was the stripper that came to celebrate with us. The evening ended with a bunch of friends picking me up and throwing me in the swimming pool at the townhome complex. I was soaked, cold, but so alive and ready. I didn't feel that way the next morning when I tried to wake. Luckily, I had a day to recover before boarding the plane.